Hello, everybody, volleyball coaches, volleyball fans, volleyball supporters, and GMS Plus members. Thank you for joining us for this GMS show. And thank you for taking some time out of your day to learn and improve as coaches. And speaking of learning and improving as coaches, we're super excited to have the head coach of the TCU Horned Frogs with us, Jason Williams. He just wrapped up his third season, going into his fourth season now in Fort Worth with TCU, and Jason has a lot of awesome stuff to share with us throughout this episode. My name is Dave Neely, coming at you from Provo, Utah. And Jason, as we've talked, you had some ideas, some things you wanted to share. So we're going to talk about just what you've done with some of your programs and as an assistant coach in the NCAA, as a head coach. Going back before that, you were a club coach in Texas, and we can talk about some of your experiences there and just your desire to keep learning and growing as a coach. And certainly that's what we want all high school coaches and club coaches out throughout the country to do, is keep learning. Just to start, Jason, why is it important that coaches continue to learn, whether going to clinics or conventions or even watching shows like this?
Yeah, no, first off, appreciate you having me on the show. Excited to just share. That's the way I feel like I learned. But yeah, I think I believe like learners learn. So no matter what you are doing, but in our craft as coaches, there's so much now with the way the game has changed that if you just don't stay on top of it, you'll either get left behind or you just won't have success. So I think you learn from people who figured it out. That's really the secret sauce is you don't have to figure out everything on your own, but just be a little bit of a parrot.
Yeah, awesome. And we're going to talk about some of those learning ideas a little bit later. But I want to start, Jason, with what you've done as an assistant coach and a head coach in the NCAA. And we talk about this at our coaching clinics when we go out to different college campuses throughout the country. And we talk about the margins are thin. And we talk about how maybe just a couple percentage points, scoring a couple more percentage points or scoring a couple less percentage points throughout the course of a match or throughout the course of a season can make a huge difference in your win-loss record. And so we're looking here. You were an assistant coach with Ryan McGuire at Baylor, and your first year there, along with Ryan's first year, was in 2015. And leading up to that season, we can see that Baylor was kind of just a 500 program, right? They had some 500 seasons. They had maybe a good season in 2012, and then a rough season in 2013, another losing season in 2014. You guys get there in 2015, and you can see just an immediate impact in the win-loss record. What do you attribute that to? If someone were to come and say, how did Baylor get good in 2015? What's your answer there?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, I consider Ryan a friend and I think a mentor for me. Ryan's a great coach, and I think right out of the gate, he did a great job because he knew exactly what he wanted the program to look like. So it honestly that first season, it was a lot of just Ryan running everything, right? Like he would just tell us what we needed to do and how he wanted a drill to look and he did a great job of giving us, a little longer leash in terms of training. But no, I think he just was a little more of a like it's my way and this is what I want it to look like. So he took a lot of control early, and then we just built from there. But yeah, just something I probably copied from him is just you got to create program standards and you got to have values. So his personal values tied in with his values, and I think everybody just bought into that.
What kind of conversations leading into maybe that 2015 season was Ryan having, and maybe you were part of some of those conversations with the players about, hey, yeah, maybe these last two seasons you've had some rough years, but we can get to where we want to be?
Yeah, the conversations were definitely there. Recruiting was tricky back then, so we didn't know um, kind of what that was going to look like. But we had Katie Stager on that team, who eventually ended up being second team All American, and we had Andy Malloy, who played a year at Nebraska, her grad year. So we had a little bit of talent on the pins, but all the other positions were probably why they weren't winning, and so the conversation was we gotta train these players up, and we gotta squeeze what we can out of them, and then we need our couple of rock stars to be rock stars in the matches, that we need. And we had a couple of really good wins and probably too many bad losses that first year, and most of those were in non-con. Like we just lost matches that we just should not have lost, but we just weren't ready to play, at that point. Once we got into conference, we had some good wins. And the RPI, I think we were like 42 in the RPI, but our conference record was pretty bad, so we didn't make the tournament. But then you can see after that
Yeah.
we started figuring out how to get wins.
And then what led to 2019 and number one team in the nation, number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament, Final Four. Ryan won ABCA National Coach of the Year, and you got to be part of that staff. Just this progression from 17 and 13 to 29 and 2 in a not very long amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, having a Yossi, a Yassiana Presley helps when you have a special player. I mean, player of the year, national player of the year, like, as she got better, we got better for sure, right? I think we felt like we trained well, so and then we just got some better kind of athletes in the door that were bought in, and I think it took a couple of years, even though we had some success. It just took a couple of years for everybody to really get fully bought in to, yeah, we could actually make the Final Four. I don't think before 19 that really anybody truly believed that. It was like Sweet 16 was like
Yeah.
the epic, like season. And but going, I mean, we opened that season at Nebraska, but we played UCLA and Creighton. We didn't play Nebraska, and we swept both of them. And when we swept UCLA, which their setter went down at the beginning of the first set, so that helped us. But when we swept UCLA, we're like, oh, that's surprising. And then we swept Creighton, a really good Creighton team, and we were like, whoa, that's really surprising. And then we didn't lose again until we played Texas at in Austin. And I think just the belief continued to grow. Winning masks a lot of little issues you have. And we just Ryan did a great job of just like telling them like this is our Final Four season, and we just
Yeah.
didn't expect anything but that.
That sounds a lot like the BYU team in 2018, just 12
Hmm.
months previously. I know they had very similar conversations and talked about, hey, this is a Final Four type of roster and a Final Four type of team, and that's exactly what ended up happening. Um, so you were an assistant coach on this staff. We have a lot of assistant coaches that are watching this right now, high school assistant coaches, club assistant coaches, college assistant coaches. If someone were to ask you this question, how would you answer? How could I be a good assistant coach? How can I help my program, and how can I help this coaching staff as an assistant coach?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, at our level here, and I would probably say at all levels across the board, like your job as an assistant is to make life easier for the head coach. So making a move from assistant to head coach, which we could talk about as well, it is not easy, especially at this level. Like it is very difficult because uh, two main things. As an assistant coach, I was like beloved at Baylor. Like everybody, I could be the fun coach. I could be there for the players. I wasn't the decision maker, right? I had no control over the final lineup, so just the relationship you can have with the players is completely different. So my role was to kind of be a buffer, make sure Ryan knew what was going on, but like what could I handle that didn't need to get on Ryan's plate so he could focus on bigger picture, things. because as a head coach, you just have meetings, you have other things you got to go to. It just eats up your day. And then I would say on top of that is like, don't be content with your role, you know? So with me being like an associate head coach, I was continually learning, one, to be the best assistant coach I could and maybe in the country. And then my aspirations were to be a head coach. So it's like, what else do I need to be learning? But, I trained setters at a time, and then Sam took that over and I started doing the defense and training the pins. And I just dove into it because to to be able to run the scout and run the blocking calls at our level, you really got to know what you're doing, and you got to know the numbers, you got to know the blocking schemes, and you got to have um, a really good instinct on pulling the trigger when you're scheming. So in club, when I was in club, and then my wife coached high school for a long time, so I was around that. But the scheming can happen later and still have success at a lower level, right? Like you could say, hey, we're going to go double the
Yeah.
outside on every, out of system ball or whatever, something simple. You could miss the first 3 or 4 kills that they have, and you could start doing it and it's gonna work. But at our level, if you miss it and you're a play or 2 behind, they're gonna change something, or they're gonna anticipate you're gonna do that, and they're just gonna be a step ahead. So just really learning and understanding the sport and understanding what you can control in your role, I think is huge. Where I see some assistants maybe struggle is they just like love their position and they don't really continue to learn, um, or they sometimes the ego gets involved, and you tend to forget it's not about you and it's about the players and the program, and so I would just, if you're content, you're probably not learning. You just got to continue to keep learning about the sport, because I've been doing this for 25 years, and I feel like I learn something every day, especially when it comes to the sports science of the game, and the way the numbers are more accessible to us.
How can, staying on this assistant coach, head coach uh, topic, how can coaching staffs um, be better from what you've seen at making sure that all of us, head coach, other assistant coach in a high school program, maybe it's head coach, varsity assistant coach, JV coach, freshman coach, sophomore coach, that we're all united in the way that we're teaching, that we're training, that we're running drills and practices. How can we be better at that? And what kind of work does it take to ensure that that's the case?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think there are a couple of factors involved in that. So, like in high school, what I've seen before is like, say, maybe you have a really good high school head coach that is a very good manager and maybe played at a high level, maybe has some good technical experience, but doesn't know how to train every position. So um, you obviously look for that need, but in high school, a lot of times, especially in state schools, you don't get your choice of who your assistants are all the time, right? Like they fill the teaching position first, then the coaching position. So when my wife was coaching, a lot of that was like, okay, you find out what their experience is, and you just got to be really transparent. The communication has got to be huge, and it's like, hey, I don't think you know a lot about XYZ. Let's start training you. And I think some head coaches either get into the pattern of like, this is how we do things, especially in high school, and assistant coaches that don't have experience are just really just like chasing their tail trying to figure things out. So I think really having a plan, or really talking through the practice plans, not just to help that practice that day better, but to just be teaching your younger, maybe more inexperienced coaches, like, this is why we're running this drill. This is how I need you to run this drill. Maybe you have to demo it first, and then you allow them to start running it. And if they can't hit a down ball, right, just like your clinics, like you got to train them. You got to teach
Yeah.
them how to hit down balls. You got to teach them how to bowl. You got to teach them, just, and if they're just not a former athlete, right? That happens too. Then you got to find a role for them, or you got to give them something that they can add value to the practice, but I've seen too many staffs where there's, the head coach is just lets the JV and freshman coach go, right? Or maybe they train in double days, right? Like they train early, they make them come and watch camp, and then they make them come and watch during double days or help out. But I think if you want a program to be great, you have to be involved as a head coach the entire season. And even as busy as it is, you just have to make the time, or you got to make them come to practices every once in a while, which I know is not ideal for them, but um, younger coaches are looking to elevate themselves, and you just tell them like, hey, if you want to be a head coach, or you want to, get out of the junior high and be at the high school, like this is what it's going to take. And I know a lot of coaches do that, but where I see the downfall is like the lack of consistency or motivation to continue to help those coaches be productive, right? Or I've just even seen the like, well, hopefully they're not here next year type deal, but that doesn't help you this year, right?
Yep.
And I think everybody can be trained to coach. Just some are going to be a whole lot better than others.
Yeah. Um, so 2021 season ends and you go to TCU and you start with the TCU program in 2022. And looking at this, we can see that 2021 team was 8-18, 2-14 in the conference, and 17-11 in your first year with an 11-5 record. Jason, that's just a massive turnaround from one year to the other. You saw that 2021 team as an opponent when you coached against them with Baylor, and then now you're running the ship in 2022. What changed there? How did that team go from 8-18 to 17-11 just like that?
Yeah, I think there was some talent on the team. Um, and there's some funny little side stories that come with that first year. But I think, and I know Jill, the previous coach, really well. She actually works for us still at TCU, so I see her every day. I think she knew what she was doing, but she had just maybe lost some players on the team, and the motivation just wasn't there. And so, when you say the margins are small, well, if you're not passionate and you're not putting everything you can in there, then that it's near impossible to win those small margins. And that's where a lot of those, I mean, they lost, I think of those 14 losses, I think it was like 7 or 8 of them were in 5, like they had some potential, they just weren't winning. So when I came in, I took a little bit out of Ryan's playbook of like, hey, here are our standards, right? These are my personal values. Here are what the program's values are going to be from the beginning, and here are the standards. And our standards were Final Four caliber standards, and so it's like I could have, and Callie, would be funny if Callie was on here, because I probably said you're either all in or you're all out 100 times that year, and it was really just kind of a Jedi mind trick of like, you guys, like we can win games if you guys just buy into what I'm saying. And I know I'm trying to build trust, but for me, like I'm very transparent. I was taught if you want to build trust, you just tell the truth. And I would just tell the hard truths to some people. Be like, hey, if you're not willing to do this, you're not going to play. And if you're not going to play, your future is going to be at risk here. And so um, yeah, so we went through a lot of those kind of hard conversations, but I had an Audrey Knowles who ended up being first team All Big 12. I had a Julia Adams who was second team All Big 12 her freshman year. So I had her, her junior year. Her and Audrey were the same year. Um, Kinsey Nichols was a 3-year 5-1 starter, as a setter. So we had some experience and we had some talent, but we relied on freshmen and a couple of transfers that were not high profile transfers, but they were helping us move the needle at least. And then honestly, now that she's done, I wouldn't talk about her then, but now that she's done, like Callie, my daughter was just a huge piece in us flipping the culture around. Uh,
You you mentioned establishing a Final Four standard. How do you do that? And if I'm a high school coach, how do I establish a state championship level standard? Do you do that with stats? Do you do that with video? Do you do that with, hey, this is this is what we're going to wear to practice. This is how early we're going to be. Kind of how do you establish what a Final Four culture is in your job, or and how can high school coaches establish with their program and with their players, this is a state championship caliber and you need to be either all in or all out?
Yeah, no, great. I think it definitely starts with kind of your values and your standards. So, Ryan will say this, but like you either rise to your standards or you fall to what you tolerate. And I think a lot of mediocre or not great coaches just tolerate too much. So I'm very laid back. Like the way I'm talking to you is the way I talk to the team 99% of the time, right? I'm probably too monotone to them. There are times where the voice needs to be raised, right? The trick, this is kind of a secret sauce of mine, but the trick in volleyball, and especially even in a female sport, is it's really, really easy in athletics for you to lose your attention. So, how you train to get athletes to recapture and refocus their attention on their task at hand is something special that coaches need to learn how to do. Right? There's some tricks you can do with that, but uh, standards are huge. And then I think like what you were talking about is true. Um, I'm not like the drill sergeant type, but I don't allow anything to drop below the standard. So if anything drops below the standard, there's either a consequence or there's an error correction, right? So on the court, if you hit balls wildly out of bounds, we just correct it right then because I believe not till we do it till we get it right, but until we can't get it wrong. So that's kind of our standard, right? Like I don't tolerate letting you just on a high inside set, just crush the ball 5 feet out of bounds. Like that's not going to help us win those small margins. So, um, and I want to be the aggressor. So I want to score the point. So my philosophy, so kind of back to your question, I think the standards, the routines. So whatever your routines are. So if you are a drill sergeant type coach, then yes, same attire at practice, same warm up, look the same when you travel, like all that. Like that's totally great because that builds routines and it builds discipline. If you're not that, then you need to have some kind of routines and not allow, um, say you don't make everybody wear the same shirt in practice, then don't allow that standard to drop at all. I mean, at all. So if you're like, hey, you just have to wear Jason Williams high school t-shirts, I don't care what color it is.
Yeah.
Do not let anything but Jason Williams high school t-shirts in the gym, like period. And that still holds the standard, but still can be like, I don't care what colored shirt you wear. But they show up with a random shirt, like don't allow it to happen. Don't let them practice. I think that it requires that kind of discipline and standard. Um, and then you have to be consistent in the communication. You have to communicate with your players, and it's really hard in club and really hard in high school because in high school, you have more control of your program. That is your program. You're kind of top dog, but you don't get to choose your players like we do here, right? And you don't have the option. I mean, you could not get them off the roster, but the more people you kick off the roster, the less pool you have to
Yep.
to to have athletes, right? Um, so just having that consistency because that's what I hear the most from club parents and high school parents is we never hear anything from our coach. You tell the players something, that information doesn't get relayed to the parents, or you say something and you go back on it, and now you kind of lost some trust. And
Yep.
so just trying to have consistency there, and then really this is the probably the hard truth, right? Like the tough love is there are a lot of high school and club coaches that don't know what they're doing yet. And people can sniff out that stuff pretty quick. So You got to sometimes fake it till you make it, or you got to you got to stay in your lane. You know, like I joke or whatever that commercial is, where the guy's like, "Stay in your lane, bro." You know, like I think good coaches know how to do that, right? If you're not very good technical trainer, do the best you can to find somebody who is on your staff, and if not, then you need to be doing more of these watching more of these things and going to more clinics because the quality of how you run practice is going to define, I feel like, a lot of how your games go. So yeah, I think it's a lot of that, and then yeah, I think um, the numbers, like you were talking about, for like a Final Four or high school, Final Four state championship caliber program. I think you watch what the other ones that have success are doing. And if you have access to those numbers, you look at what their numbers are and you figure out where your standards need to be based on what those numbers are. And that's what I do, right? We take like the last 4 or 5 years of Final Four numbers and we say like, okay, if we want to go to the Final Four, then we need to pass a 2.35, and
Yep.
or higher, right? If when Ryan first started, he would say 2.6. And I'd be like, I'm not sure how many teams in the country pass a 2.6. But that was his way of just saying, like, with the talent we had, with the hitters we had, if we truly want to get to a Final Four, our passing is going to have to be elite. And so, yeah, I think you just got to go down that road and find where you can move the needle on some things, and then you got to find your blind spots as well.
There's probably at least 50 follow-up questions, Jason, that I can
Yeah,
ask.
sorry. Yeah, yeah.
Um, but one of them that I want to ask right now, you talk about uh, establishing this standard and don't tolerate anything less than that. How can how can high school coaches that are coaching 15 and 16-year-old girls do that without being mean or without hurting feelings of these young women? Because that's a real thing, and we need to be nice, and we don't want them walking out crying or scared or feeling unsafe in the gym. And so how can we establish that standard and keep our players at that standard while doing it in an appropriate way?
Yeah, so a couple of things there, and that's a great follow up. So I learned a lot from Kim Mulkey while she was at Baylor, right? Kim Mulkey, women's basketball coach at LSU now. She is a perfect example of tough love in practice, and I mean like players crying, like tougher than you want to be in high school for sure. Um, but every player on that team, when she was at Baylor, right, would go to battle for her any day of the week because she really cared for them off the court. She was just really tough on them on the basketball side. I think as a high school club's different, but as a high school coach, you have more access to the players, so you see them. So you have to put the effort in to make sure you prove that you care about them beyond volleyball, right? And I think a lot of high school coaches do a pretty good job of that. But what you have to be super careful about is you cannot have a double standard. And that's what I see a lot of is you cannot allow Sally to get out of a consequence because of whatever reason it is. You just start from the beginning, like day one, right? Like if you're experienced and you have some success, that helps, right away. But if you're just trying to flip a program around or you're trying to start from scratch, the first meeting you have with the parents, here are the standards. Here's what we're going to do for consequences if you drop below the standard. And it starts from day one. And I'm telling you, you have zero issues after that. You will always have issues with parents thinking you're too tough or unfair. Or, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion to go down, right? Like that's good. That's a tough cultural and society norm that we have to battle as coaches. But very few parents have I seen complain about unfairness or anything that you do in terms of consequences if it's consistent across the board. And just don't do anything ridiculous, right? Like don't do 100 burpees, don't do 10 gassers where they can't walk the next day, like don't do ridiculous consequences for me, and this is kind of the way I've built the program, is like last year we got rid of all of our team rules. And so people are like, whoa, that's crazy. Like you can't do that. Um, but what I've decided is we have four pillars. So four program pillars: honor, loyalty, gratitude, and joy. And I feel like every decision you got to make can fall in one or multiple of those pillars, right? So obviously, the are you doing things the right way, showing up on practice, early, going to school, all that stuff. That's those are all honorable traits, right? The loyalty part makes sense, right? And the gratitude, like if you just come to practice full of gratitude, like we're not going to have any issues. Usually the people who complain are just very disgruntled, not grateful for what they have, entitled, right? Like we have to deal with all that, but like I foster a gracious program mentality. So I just keep reminding them every day. So then when we get to an issue where they may feel ungrateful, I can just give them a friendly reminder and they're like, yeah, you're right. I need to change my perspective or my attitude. And then joy is huge, right? Like if you just have joy in what you do, it just things are always positive. So, but it doesn't mean that we don't have policies. So we have a travel policy, right? We have locker room policy. We have academic policy and nutrition policy. We have policies that would fall under a lot of the rules, but we just don't have the crazy, like weird you have to wear the same color t-shirt rule, because we feel like our program now, the culture is the one that's leading that, right? So my captains create that rule. They're like, we wear the same shirt every day, and if they don't, then I can question them and they'll take care of it, right? And then if they can't take care of it, then I'll take care of it. um, but I do have what I call a behavior changer. So I do have a consequence. It's a coach on one type drill that it's super simple, a 10 touch type drill, but they absolutely hate it. And when they do it, they don't want to ever do it again. So if they fall below the standard and they have to do it, I call it a blue lip. If they have to do it, I rarely have issues with them falling below the standard again. So, and that's kind of copied that from Marv, Marv Dumpy. He was really good at relationships with players. He was really good with like not falling below the standard with stuff like that. And again, I copy some of the greats, and I think that's the way to do it. And then we might talk about it later, but in case I forget about it, um, what I think you should not be is like a YouTube coach, right? So like be invested in things like watching this show, going to this clinic, but like don't just search YouTube for an issue that you've had or a training drill or something and then implement it right away without understanding what the drill is or the purpose of the drill. So like copying new drills is awesome, but I'll tell you at our level, majority of the top college coaches in the country have like 5 drills that they run. We train different ways with like schools, like I'll have passing school or attacking school or something like that. But the actual 6-on-6 or one-way drills that we call them, like we all run basically the same 5 or 6
Yeah.
drills, and we just call them something different, and we do them in a different maybe how we enter balls, but they're all the exact same.
Um, can you give two or three real quick examples of when you might bust out your coach on one?
Yeah. So, missing a meeting. So like, missing a treatment, missing an academic meeting or tutoring, I tell them all meetings, everything that you schedule, we have a scheduler, Teamworks that we use. Everything that you schedule is like coming to practice. So if you miss it without communication, then it's like missing practice, and so, um, uh, those are examples. Not turning assignments in when you say you are, right. Like we know they get behind a little academically, and we let the academic advisor help guide them on that. But like when you say I'm going to turn in my assignment tonight and you don't do it, then that's dropping, you're not doing, that's not an honorable thing. You're not doing what you say you're going to do. So it's little things like that, but those things, one, if you let them go, they add up and then they turn into much bigger deals, right? or I can just nip it in the bud with a quick blue lip. Again, 20, 30-second drill. But they don't ever want to have to see their name up there again. So it's stuff like that, right? Like just truly I kind of copy that from Urban Meyer's above the line, right? Like you're either doing things above the line or below the line, and I don't want to have people on the roster that want to cut corners all the
Yeah.
time.
Any on the court stuff? So like showing up late to practice or maybe a non-pursuit during a drill, or are you saving that
Uh,
for the ones
so
that are more serious violations?
Yeah, so obviously, if you're late to practice without communicating with me, which only happened a couple of times in year one, that would be a blue lip, right? But effort, which is a non-negotiable, really, but effort and maybe just falling below the standard that we have, like volleyball standards. So we just say you got to hit in or get blocked. So if you can't hit in the court, then challenge the block, right? So if you fall below that standard, and you're not trying to tool, like there's grace in some areas, right? But
Yeah.
again, the blindly hitting the ball 5, 6 feet out of bounds, on a bad set is a poor choice. That just turns usually into error correction. So we'll just correct it. Like I said, I want to do it not till they get it right, but until they can't get it wrong. And and then if it's effort or communication issues, something like that, those just turn into coach on one or coach on twos, like your standard, touch three balls or five balls or whatever. And yeah, that's on that. But the blue lips, like I said, are behavior changers. So if you're doing something that I think is below the standard and it's allowing me to help you change your behavior, then you'll do that. And I don't think it's as brutal as burpees or bear crawls or running, a ton. And so, because for us, we have to watch the load. So I have to be very careful. Like, if I'm going to punish them in that other stuff, like it's going to increase their load and then it's going to reduce the reps that they can do. And we get into a whole nother mess.
Ball gets hit blindly 5, 6 feet out of bounds, and you mentioned you want to give a correction. Is that just you got a ball on your hip? Mike Wall is awesome at this, and you just walk out and say, "Hey, Sally, I'm going to toss you this ball, and I want you to hit a better hit, and then we're going to carry on the 6-on-6 drill." Is that how you give that correction opportunity?
Yeah, similar. I'll usually, like, I have, our managers or people who are off, they're trained to just be standing by a cart, right? And when I'll tweet the whistle, and I usually like will be hut or something. They'll toss me a ball, and I'll either do one of two things. I'm like, hey, I need you to hit three of these balls in, or make a better decision, right? So I'll just toss three of the exact same ball and do it, or I'll take a ball and toss it over the net to whoever had the first touch, and I'll just yell, "Fix it." And so I either be like, because it may have just been a terrible set, right? And a bad choice. So then I may just be like, I don't want to encourage the bad set option. So hey, let's just fix it, make a better set and hit the same ball, right? And so yes, a very simple like that. And then I may say, hey, hit two in, we're playing the second ball. And then they know after
Yep.
this, on the second one, we just play it out from there. So yeah, very similar.
Cool. I love your team rule, your team rule idea. In 2020, my very first meeting with my girls' team and parents, I said, We're not going to have this big old whiteboard full of team rules, but we're going to be good students. We're going to be good teammates. We're going to be good learners, and we're going to have fun." And those became our team rules. But, if so we didn't have you need to be on time to practice rule, but if you were going to be a good teammate and a good learner, then you were going to be on time.
Right.
And we didn't
Right.
have a rule about where you sat in math class at 8 a.m. on Monday. But if you were going to be a good student, you were going to be there and on time and probably sitting close to the front and getting good grades. I've
Well,
changed
let
that,
me add
Jason.
sorry, let me add to that of got with high school and club coaches, because you brought up a good point. But when you do rules, this is what I've learned. When you make rules, again, I like policies because policy is like kind of written in, and this is just for everybody across the board. They always joke like when you make these rules, people always try to break them, because the rule is created because of something bad that happens
Yeah.
anyway, right? Um, But what coaches, if they don't already realize this, is what you need to realize is in female sports there are always scorekeepers. There's always, why does she get that and I don't get this, or I did this and I'm doing it the right way. Sally's not doing it the right way. Why is she not getting punished for it? Right. And that creates a lot of conflict on a team. And then I believe drama is just conflict not dealt with. Right. So if you don't deal with conflict right away, it's going to turn into some kind of drama. Right. It's going to get to parents and all that. So the double standard I talked about before, the scorekeepers on your team, it's going to drive them crazy. And these are usually like your type A, people. They cannot handle it. Like it truly will drive them insane. And because they're rule followers, they're not going to cause issues about it, but they'll start complaining in the locker room to soundboards, right? So now you've got scorekeepers and now you've got soundboards on your team, and then you're just going to have all kinds of trouble after that. So if you just keep it consistent, and again, if somebody has a really good reason, you just communicate it. You'd be
Yeah.
like, hey, Josie was late to practice. um, she called me early, she let me know she's got something with her family she had to deal with or whatever. Then whether they like it or not, they will understand it at that point, right? But you don't say anything, or you're like, oh, that's just Josie, or whatever the reason is, then your scoreboarders and your soundboarders are going to cause you problems. So another little free advice on that. If a lot of people I know already know that, but
Awesome. You mentioned a few minutes ago teaching good techniques and being a good coach of fundamentals. As you look at some of these turnarounds that you've seen at Baylor and now more specifically at TCU, how important is the fundamentals, or how important are the fundamentals that we know how to take a good four-step approach and that our blockers know how to make a good three-step crossover move and that we can do a nice four off, four on transition attacking footwork pattern. How important are those fundamentals to help a 8-18 team get to 17-11 and then 22-8?
yeah, I think the lower the level, and not talking talent, but just the lower the level of the program. So even age, right? Like 10 to 12-year olds, right, need a ton of mechanical and technique training. And a losing team needs a lot of technical training because that means they're not hitting the standard, or there's a lack of discipline and consistency there at that point. So I think I think Ryan was a great trainer, is a great trainer, and I think that was a big part of our turnaround, is that he took some not Final Four talent and figured out a Final Four team by some really good training. I think my staff is awesome. I think that's a big part of our turnaround, and they know what they're doing. And I was able to not do what Ryan did. I didn't have to come in and be like, it's my way or the highway. I came in and I'm like, I need you guys to move the needle in these two or three areas. And if you need help, come to me. But if not, and you feel like you can do it, run with it. And overall, like, systems was all me, right? Like, we didn't have conversations about systems in year one. I'm like, I know what we need to do, and we're going to do this, and then after the season we'll talk about it, right? And so I controlled the systems, but I let my staff train, and I think that helped us, right? And when we won that, I think we got third in conference that first year with the 11 wins, and man, I'd have to go back and look, but my guess is 4 or 5 of those wins were five setters, and if we didn't train the way we did, I don't think we win those matches.
From a systems perspective, uh, what what do you see in a volleyball system, whether offensively or defensively, that can maybe be the fastest kind of quick hitter change to improvement? And the I'll give you what Mike Wall's answer would be. He would say, if we pass more balls and dig more balls off the net, that's a quick hitter solution to winning a lot more rallies, right? And we can do that kind of with the snap of a finger. We're just going to dig more balls and pass more balls far away from the net, and then we're going to run an offense there. How would you answer that question? What kind of system offense or system defense can coaches implement in a short amount of time to help us improve from 8-18 to a 17-11?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I've seen it twice at Baylor and with us at TCU. Mike is 100% accurate on that. Like I don't even in my head, I don't even think I even ever have to say that anymore. We don't, we may overpass every once in a while just with heat coming at you, right? But like all of our balls are way off the net, and we obviously have the size where we can run our hitters and our offense from pretty far off. Um, so I agree with that. But where I would add to that is training first contact is in the middle of the court. So like, so for us, we pass and dig middle, middle, right? So we have kind of a box that we tape out right in the middle. It's about 3 or 4 feet off the net to about the 10-foot line. And all of our first touches, we call it the pad, right? We're frogs. So we to the pad. We want all of our first touches to go in the pad. Um, for multiple reasons. Not only because it's a lot easier to run your offense, especially as fast as we go from the middle of the court, right? You keep all your sets pretty quick, but even our digs as they come off past the 10-foot line, the middle of the court is a much easier angle to make sets and to hit than balls that go left, towards zone 5 or towards zone 1. So I'm not a fan of passing right, like right of center is okay, but like I think when you pass right, like just bad news starts to happen unless you're really, really good at short string backsides,
Yeah.
um, or D balls, like you just have somebody who can just crush a back row ball. Um, but out of the middle puts the most stress on majority of defenses and blockers. So I think if you, again, that's one of our standards, that if you make all of your first touches just in the middle of the court and let's add off, right, you will see a significant change in balls that you lose because the pass is too tight and little setters can't deal with them. The pass is on the net and you get the swipes and the overpasses, right? Um, and then adding with that would be, not diving into too much, but having a pocket for the setters, like just creating a starting spot for the setters that is the same every time. Because when I watch teams that don't pass middle middle and their setters don't get to the same spot, they're just running around and then they're making bad sets and then you're tipping or hitting easy balls over and then good teams are just crushing balls back at you, right? Like,
Yep.
so my mentality is we like to crush balls and break fingers. That's kind of what we want to do. When we play like Texas, when they were in our conference, I told my team I would rather you try to break their fingers and miss a ball and hit somebody 10 rows in the stands than to hit an easy roll shot to Texas and let them just get into rhythm and come back and crush balls at us. I'd rather them just get out of sync and not even have a chance to transition
Yep.
and just give them the point. And we just then at that point we got to figure out how to score more points than them.
Yep. So establishing good targets, it
Yeah,
sounds like has
very
been
very long-winded answer to that.
uh,
Yeah,
well, and an important aspect of what we see when we're out there at different gyms, and we talk about that at clinics, and it sounds like that's worked for you. Um, I want to just make one little note about this. Margins are thin, and have you look at my high school regions records and point percentage for the 6 teams that are in my high school region, updated as of last night. And you can see this team one at the top, 7 wins and no losses, scoring 52%, a little bit over 52% of all rallies inside of region play. And my team, unfortunately, is team number 5 here. But we're scoring 48% of points. And so we can see that just a couple percentage points are separating a 7-0 team and a 2-5 team. How can we as coaches look at data like this to realize that, hey, just one rally per set, right? If there's 50 rallies in a single set, and 2% is going to make this huge difference. How can we use data like this to turn that 2-5 team into, maybe not that 7-0 team, but a 4-3 team or a 5-2 team?
Yeah, I think, depending on the level of your league, and then you've got to decide, again, where your team is and where you can score points. The first thing I would look at is, I mean, I'm a true believer in point scoring, so I would look at like how many points of 25 are we scoring? Are we scoring 14 points, 15? The better teams are probably 15, 16, the probably not great teams are 12, 13, from there. Um, and then what's on average, what are the teams in my league um, giving up? What is their error percentage, right? So at our level, I mean, you're talking like five, 6 errors a game is like you're lucky, right? And serving is a little different for us. Like there's we serving errors. Some people really count them, some people don't because, I mean, that affects the defensive part. But just strictly beyond serving errors, the other errors, right, is you just cannot have more than 5 total. Um, and so I would look at that, and then I would decide, am I a team, if I'm coaching a high school team, am I a team that just serving in at over 90%, um, does that give us the best shot of maybe gaining, again, of 9 out of 10 serves that are in. So of those 9 balls, do they first ball side out at 50%, right? Let's just say they first ball side out at 50, maybe not even first ball, just side out at 50%, which is pretty good for lower teams, maybe higher for better teams.
Yeah.
You're still going to score 3 to 4 points just by serving in, right? Because they're just going to be high air, or you're going to win the rally, somehow.
Yeah.
So that's already a decision you can make that could change again, depending on your level. If you're playing a state championship caliber team, you may not be able to just serve in. um, Third ball decisions, right? Are you the aggressor? Are you want to hit and get points, or do you want to make them play? We kind of talk about make them pay or make them play. So they give us an easy ball, we're going to make them pay. But if we can't crush it, then we're going to make them play. We're going to tip a ball or roll a ball, put it on the setter, whatever your tactical stuff that you like to do is to make them earn that point. Because again, in transition, most teams, maybe they hit 300, 400 if they're awesome. So of 10 balls that you just make them play, now you could score 6, 7, 8 points of
Yeah.
those. So um, I'm not a fan of the like I want to score the point, but I also don't want to bleed points out. Like every error you make takes pressure off them to side out. So I think there's strategies there where I watch teams and I watch club right now a lot. When I was watching high school, it was reactionary coaching sometimes of like after they made 2 or 3 errors, they would talk about keeping balls in play where you could almost have that strategy from the beginning. Like, hey, if we don't feel like we can take a good swing, don't just crush the ball, like hit your shot, whatever your shot is. Some are good little hairpin tippers, some can hit down the line, some have that good little roll shot to the belly, like just hit your shot and let us play from there. And that alone could be 2 to 5%, depending on who you're playing, right at that point. So my guess is like even in your league, and you might have those numbers, but it there's probably a pretty ridiculous amount of errors that go on. Um,
Well, I'll just tell you what happened in our last practice, which was 2 nights ago. We played one of our GMS drills. It's in our GMS coaching clinic manual called Make 'em Pay, and where we play a single set. And we played a single set to 15. So we had team A and team B, and they were split up evenly and equally. And our manager Emma kept score, just like a score would be kept during a match. And I had my own flip chart, and in the drill we keep track of errors. How many overpasses, how many non-pursuits, how many times did we not cover? Most specifically, how many times did we hit a ball in the net, or these
mhm.
wildly out of bounds balls that you talked about earlier? And the team that lost gave up 15 points. And so the opponent on Emma's score flip chart had 15. And on my flip chart, that team that lost had 11, meaning 11 errors out of the 15 rallies that the opponent scored. It's just mind boggling. And so, Jason, how do you keep track of that number? And how do you communicate that number to your players? And how are you talking about, hey, 5 errors or less per set if we want to win?
Yeah, so, I mean, we talk about it a lot, right? Especially if it's I mean, another little tidbit I think with coaches is, and I think you guys, sometimes address this in the clinic though, is after a win, especially if it's a tight win, is a good time to address some of these issues, not necessarily after a loss, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't want to hear, you don't need to beat them down after a loss. Like obviously they know errors probably created the loss, but usually when we're in that situation where we have a tight win or we didn't play very well, but we still won, I will always bring up the errors, so whether we hit the standard or not, And then I'm very clear in practice. This is a training drill. Like that's why I call them schools, right? Like we're in passing school. You're not getting statted in passing school, and everything else you are getting statted. So when we're in training in a school, like release your worry about errors and focus on the technique, focus on the process. But when we are in a statted drill, uh, we don't let them make errors, right? Like if it counts for a loss, but I'll correct it. Sometimes we have them physically run to the whiteboard, and so we want to be 2 to 1 block to error, right? So we would want you to get blocked 2 times to every hitting error that you make. So we go to every time they get blocked or make a hitting error, we go and they just tag their name on the whiteboard for a physical reminder of, okay, hey, I got blocked. That stunk. I lost the point, but that's what I'm trying to do, right? And then when they see they got more hitting errors and blocks, it's kind of that physical, at the end of practice. So we work on that. We talk about it, and then again, our style of play is be aggressive but don't make errors. So the whole practice when we're training, I have a lot of drills that we do where it's unleash, crush balls and break fingers, but you got to do it in a way that you got to find the court or you got to find the block. So which sometimes hurts us, we crush a lot of balls into the block, but like I said, I keep reminding them, crush balls and break fingers. We're not breaking forearms, right? So if you're hitting the edge of the block or you're hitting high, you're doing good things, but you're going to hit low, like expect to get housed, I mean, that's just the way it is. So I think the way you do it in training helps relay that message and builds that confidence. And then the really hard part is, um, do they have the confidence to be the aggressor? Can they hit in with pace to get the point, or are they going to be a play it safe type player in those tough times, right? And that you just got to know the player and you got to know the ability at that point.
You also talk about your desire to always be learning as a coach, and you've talked about if you're content you're not learning. Assistant coaches need to keep learning, head coaches need to keep learning. We expect that of our players, we should probably expect that of ourselves. Why is it important that we keep learning? Right, you're a head coach of a team that's been to 3 straight NCAA tournaments, you've been to a Final Four. I mean, you've done it all. As a college coach, we can say that just looking
Mhm.
at it from the outside. Why does Jason Williams need to keep learning? He already knows everything, right? Like someone might say that, but what's the answer? Why do you need to keep learning, and why do we all as coaches need to keep learning?
Yeah, no, for sure. Great question. I think because the game changes, so the game changes with the rules, right? The rules change, which change how the game goes. And then I think replay has changed a little bit. Like I feel like if you haven't learn how to use replay or how that changes the way that you do game management. That can affect a little bit of how the game goes. And then I think if you're not learning, other coaches are learning, and you're getting left behind. I mean, that's kind of my mentality. It's so funny because when I was younger and when I was playing, And I was the ESPN on TV 24/7. Like I didn't watch anything else. I hated Jeopardy, and like I just felt like I was politics were just like Russian to me, and I didn't really read books, like I was just a stump on a log, like I mean it just or a lump on a log, sorry. But as I've gotten older and as I've learned to learn, um, it just strikes a spark in you to where you just like want to continually learn from people, and conversations are fascinating. Like you had David and Ben on. I love sitting down and just talking with those guys. Ben has a great mind for the game, and it's just fun to chat with people like that. And I think if you're not learning, um, then people start talking high level and you don't know what they're talking about, and some people don't care about that, and that's okay. Again, stay in your lane, right? Like if you coach club because it's something to do and you just want some extra money, then accept that, but don't act like you're a great coach if you're not willing to learn and do things that other coaches are committing to. So yeah, I think that's it. I think just even right now, the big thing, which I know we can probably dive into a little bit, but the big thing, which I think we did a good job at Baylor when we started, is back row is becoming a big part of the women's game, and if you don't know how back row works, so say you're a little bit older female player and you didn't really set back row or anything but a high back row, the way that we're changing routes and speed and using combo plays out of the back row, like you're going to have a hard time tactically defending that if you don't even know how to run it on the offensive side. So I think there's just things like that, and I love that. That part is why I love being where we are, right? Like I love coaching club. I don't think I could ever. My wife is coaching junior high right now. I don't think I could ever coach junior high. Like that's a little that's a little tough for me. I've just when I go and I'll go and support her games and stuff, and I've just learned 8th grade girls are mean and 7th grade boys are turds. Like that's just, and I don't think I could I don't think I could do it. But yeah, I just think you have to keep learning or you're just not going to be very good at what you do.
You just reminded me my very first live show hosting for Gold Medal Squared. We called it 10 Things That We Love About the Top 10 Teams from the 2021 season.
Mm,
And you guys finished that season ranked number 10. And so Baylor was one of the teams that we featured in that live show. And I had Ryan come on and we talked about Baylor's back row attack. That's what that's what we loved about that 2021 Baylor team.
mm.
And you at TCU have been implementing that, and we're actually going to do another show with you where we're going to break down some of those back row attacking tactics and philosophies. I'm always so impressed, Jason, when I'm at the AVCA convention in December and I'll walk into a session and it might be some famous coach giving the session or it might be some high school coach with some data that is interesting or intriguing, and I'm always so impressed when I see these top 25 caliber NCAA head coaches, top 25 caliber NCAA assistant coaches sitting in those sessions still learning. And it doesn't mean that those coaches are going to go implement every single thing that they hear in those AVCA conventions, but they're learning and they're hearing different ideas, and maybe they're hearing ideas and say, I've tested that, I don't like it. And maybe they're hearing some ideas that say I can implement some of those things. And so speak to just maybe some of the humility that we might need to be willing to learn from each other, kind of regardless of how much previous success we've had.
Yeah, so I was able to do a couple of sessions. Me and Brad Keller, USC coach, did a classroom session and an on the court session, and it was great. We just want to do something together, and I love it. I think the knowledge sharing is a big part of growing the sport. Um, so one of the changes in the game that I would say that I didn't say earlier is because of technology, because of all these clinics, right? GMS and people sharing their knowledge, it's getting harder to win volleyball games because people are copying and doing the same things. And we're seeing, it's easier to defend something that you already do in your gym. Um, and so I think, and nothing to take away from the greats, right? Like I learned from Dunning, and I unfortunately, I wasn't coaching when Carl was around, and I that's one of my kinda things I wish, I woulda had some time with him, but, like, I love Chris, and I've had time with him, and, Marv is a big influence for me. I love Alex and Kyle, who was my assistant. He's now at Kentucky, is all he does is just regurgitate Marvisms, the whole time, um just the other greats, right? Like Russ and just Mick Haley has influenced me a little bit when I was at Baylor, and things that he learned, and but I think when they were coaching, they're like either they had the secret sauce or they just there wasn't a lot of knowledge sharing back then, right? Like I mean, even video share was I don't even think it started really besides VCR tapes, that you would share film. And now that everybody is learning more about the sport, which is awesome, but it just makes it harder. Like you don't have the secret sauce anymore, right? Like you got to figure out different things. And and so convention is a good way for people to share and kind of give back to the community, because there's nothing better than talking with a young, passionate coach that just wants to be in your shoes, right? Or to have a shot of coaching in college. And I remember when I was in club, I was like, man, I feel like I'm good at coaching, but like, how awesome would it be if I could get on a college staff one day, and so, yeah, I love convention. I think it gets tricky on like if you're a presenter, like what to present on, because you feel like everybody's done everything at this point. But, I might do it again next year and I might bring in somebody more experienced or somebody else from the men's game and do something on back row. Cause I know John Sproul has done that in the past, but his was like really, really high level, kind of what they were doing with the
Yeah.
USA team. But I think for like club and even college, like you can dumb that down a little bit and make it, simpler, but it's really hard. Like we run back row in games because we train back row every day in practice. So that's the only way I have the confidence to be able to run the back row we do is because we work on it every day.
You talked a few minutes ago about you were the systems coach. You got to TCU and you were the systems coach. I handled the systems and my assistant coaches got to handle some of the training and the techniques and fundamentals of individual skills. How do you, Jason, like to learn systems? And how do you like to learn when you might need to adapt some systems or change some systems? And maybe even more importantly, what systems do you have that this is the best system and we we might not want to let some kind of new fad change what we're doing system wise?
Yeah. I think so the first question and kind of learning is I love innovation. So like I absolutely love watching the international men's volleyball right now. Just the like, I feel like when I was playing, like, we experimented with so much stuff back then, but there was no platform, right? There was no social media platform. There was nothing to put out all the crazy dude perfect type stuff we would do on a volleyball court, right? So I love that they have that platform now and they're trying just like it's like the crazier the better, right? Um, and then just even college, men's game is copying that, and then the development of the women's game from, I mean, like go back to USC when Mick was there and they won back-to-back championships with April Ross. They were like old Russia high ball, like moon ball offense. And nobody likes running that offense anymore, but it worked, it was great. And so, but now I like the creativity. I think it makes the game fun. It makes it more fun to watch from a viewership standpoint. So I would say the international influence is heavy for me. I was beach mostly, but when I played indoor, I was a setter, and I learned from a Bulgarian like national team setter that moved over to the states, and so I kind of had a European flair, setting wise, back in the '90s, and so yeah, I just love watching high level volleyball. It's just like I always tell everybody, like it's like watching hockey. Like growing up, I'm like, I was football. I played football in college first, and then and then played beach. Um, I'm like, hockey is so slow and boring. Like when you watch it on TV, right? But when you go and watch a live game, you're like, this is the most incredible sport I've ever seen. These guys are so
Yeah.
ridiculous. And I feel like watching like VNL, like even now, like just watching people who are great at their job, and you can pick up like, oh, we teach that same technique, but why does Caleb Banworth pass every single ball to the target, with her technique? It's like just learning from the greats, I think is the way to go, because that's how I learned beach. I didn't train back then. We didn't train besides with each other. And it was, go watch, Karch and Steffes and record and just copy what they do. And so yeah, I think I'm learning a lot from the international game, because it gets my juices going, like, hey, can we try this? Do we have the talent to be able to run triple back row at the same time, like something crazy like that? So sorry, little winded there, but
How can a high school coach or a club coach, and you've been there and uh, as a club coach in Texas, how can how can high school coaches or club coaches learn systems from TCU or learn systems from USA in the Olympics? And then how can we not only learn those systems, but then come back to our gyms at the local high school and implement those systems?
yeah, there are, and that I knew there was something I forgot to follow on your question. There's a lot of stuff on just normal, regular systems out there. So I would just try to learn, because I don't know if everybody could say they know what their system is, right? So like define what your offensive or defensive system is. I would say it's a mentality. So like for me and Ryan kind of started this. I kind of branched out from him, so I'll give him credit for it. But he would talk about hitters having like this dragon mentality, right? Like he believes that there's dragons and butterflies, right? Where butterflies kind of flutter around the court. I kind of added in my explanation, like they're pretty, like new nails, new eyelashes, but they just get in everybody's way. And then when a big storm comes, they just kind of get blown away, right? Dragon, on the other hand, fire breathing, decimates everything in its path. So he talks about that from a hitting standpoint. I kind of took that and I branch it from a program mentality standpoint. So, like, I want everything in our program to be like a dragon, like when storms come. So, we talk about weathering storms. Well, you never see a movie with a dragon that can't fly, they're flying through storms, or
Yep.
they're above the storm, or whatever. So like dragons, like we say, dragons are the storm, like we're bringing the storm to you. So I do it from like a mentality standpoint of our systems are because we are dragons, not butterflies. So we are more of a make them pay than make them play mentality, right? And that's really hard to train, because it's requires a higher level athlete. It requires a lot of consistency with the way you attack, and it requires good decision making. And so we have to train really hard, or it becomes messy really fast. So I think you learn from watching teams that you think, hey, that's a style that I'd like to play, and don't put your players in a box. Like until you learn how to train a style or a system, you really don't know what your players can or can't do. You can label them as like, we can't go fast because we're not that good. Well, you probably can't go fast because you've never trained fast before. So to change your system, you got to understand what it takes to train that system. So it's, yeah, it's trying to find information out there, or try to get to a clinic that talks about systems. And maybe that's something I do. If I don't just do back row, maybe we do like a system one at convention. because I do think it's important. And I think when I was a club coach, I don't think I had a system. I would have just said I had a philosophy. But if I had to tell somebody what my system was, I don't know if I could have made that. So for me, it's very, very clear here. Like I think that does attribute to our success is because my system and my philosophy is very clear and I can explain it, right? And my staff has now understood they can explain it, and we can just go to work in the gym.
How do you like to teach the X's and O's of a system? So now we're actually talking about this is where our left back player is going to stand. This is where our middle back player is going to stand. Our right back player. This is where our blockers are going to be positioned based on what the other team's doing over on the other side of the net. Back row setter, front row setter. And so, kind of our defensive system. How do you like to teach that and get your players to understand this is our defensive system?
Yeah, I love the X's and O's. Like I could talk with Joe Trinzi all day long, about that stuff. But in reality, we have kind of some of those X's and O's in terms of where our standard or our bases are. But I like having a little freedom for some athleticism. And at the end of the day, especially at our level, and then as you get to the pro level, um, your eyes are probably the most trained that you're going to do over your volleyball career. Is that your eyes are going to get better, your processing speed's going to get better, the technique always gets better. But like if you tell somebody to be in this spot when this set happens, it doesn't mean they're still going to make the play, right? They still got to see what's going on. So we train the same, right? We're middle on defense, right? I'm fully bought in Carl's mentality of middle of the court is where most of the balls go. So why not just have somebody standing there? And then you got to train how to defend, right? Because a lot of balls go there because they get soft blocked. But if ball comes with heat, can you dig the heat? Can you dig it off the block, right? So you got to learn how to train all that stuff. But yeah, I think you gotta figure out who has systems that you like. And like even today, I've got a couple of college coaches coming to my practice today. They just want to see what we're doing. And I'm again, for me, I think I lost the ego in the first couple of years that I got at Baylor. I probably was like a normal club coach where I thought I was the greatest thing ever. And, we won a lot. I was fortunate to win a lot of club, tournaments. But once I started learning from Ryan, I would say it turned from ego to like a healthy arrogance. But then I learned it's not about me anymore. It's about the team and the players. And once I realized that, it just made coaching so much easier for me. But again, it's experience, right? I'm older. I have a lot of experience, so I feel comfortable having these kind of conversations where Jason 15 years ago might have stumbled through a lot of these questions, just didn't know what to say.
From an X's and O's standpoint, how do you like to adjust or or adapt your X's and O's and your systems to the personnel that you have? And what are kind of your X's and O's non-negotiables, if you have any X's and O's non-negotiables?
Yeah, well, the middle on defense is a non-negotiable, right? Like that. So we have, again, I still call them standards, but we have our standards of the X's and O's. And then if we tactically want to do something, then obviously we tactically make changes, right? I'm not, I mean, I could give some pretty compelling argument to not playing uh, standard rotation defense, but I also can give some very compelling argument to how you can play rotation defense all the time, but make it not look like a rotation defense, right? So um, I like keeping the court balance. I think if you train individual defense where they have range, so just say they have a 7 foot range around their body, like a circle. If you were to draw like just say a 6 foot circle around their body, the radius is 6 foot, and you put six people out on the court, there's nowhere a ball can go that somebody can't touch. So train the individual moves so they've got to literally crush balls to score. um, Stopped and balanced, is a non-negotiable for me when the ball's being hit, right? I've just seen so many just people in the right spot, but then they're moving the wrong way. And again, it's a little different from high school to club to especially if you're talking NCAA tournament level volleyball, is the ball's coming so fast at times you just don't have time to change your force or once you get your momentum and your force going one direction, you have to be a ridiculous athlete to change that momentum and make a quality touch. So um, but I mean, we have just your standard, like, again, the hitting and get blocked is um, challenge the block, never hit the ball in the bottom of the net, right? Like that's just not an option. So, um, but again, the lower level you are, it could just literally be a mishit, right? So they could be like, I was trying to hit high hands, but somehow it went in the bottom of the net.
Yep.
Well, that's different. But if you're trying to hit 4-4 on a set that you're not high enough to hit 4-4 and you hit bottom of the net, that's I have issues with that, right?
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I think there's just, I mean, it's hard to say, like I probably have 50 non-negotiable things, but I don't know if they're just in X's and O's, like the pocket is huge for me for setters, right?
Yep.
And our pocket's way off the net, like our pocket's really getting, close to 5 feet, is just, I don't understand why people have their setters almost touching the net and then they got to run 15 feet to get a ball that you could take 2 steps to get to. So there's those kind of things that are non-negotiables that I do think help. Um, but again, I learned that by going to GMS clinics, right? And I learned that from, like just watching other good teams. Um, and we do a lot of training of them, make them play. So I'm not a, like, you don't tip or roll to keep balls in play. You tip or roll to score, but as you get in a tougher situation, it turns into a make them play situation. So, default, like in high school alone, if just every third ball that you couldn't swing at went to the setter, that could be a 5 to 6 point difference per set. I mean, just making that one change,
Yep.
making your third touch go to the setter, front row or back row, doesn't matter where they are, you could start winning those games that you lose 25-21. Just that one thing, right? Changing your serving strategy could be a 25-22 loss, could win on that point, right? Um, and then having the ability to be able to train setters is probably a 10 point a game difference. Is if you know how to train setters, I feel like you can really make a big difference in your team, and that's hard. Not everybody knows how to train setters, so.
Hard and takes a lot of time, right? To have set or tutoring sessions and but like you said, it's important enough that it's worth the time. Uh, Give me one tip, one or two tips about how to take the opposing setter out, right? Because I agree that probably is worth a handful of points per set. But sometimes it's not very easy to do.
Right.
But how can a high school team be good at taking an opposing setter out?
So implement in a lot of your drills either one ball or multiple balls that you toss or you force them to just snap balls to zone one, because that's the hardest thing is when a third ball is bad or a second touch is bad and you have to make a decision on a third ball. The first thing that happens with a lot of players is a moment of panic, right? Is it my ball? Are you taking it? Like as a DS, right? Like I'm not a hitter. Like I shouldn't be taking this ball. But in a middle, right? Like a middle's transitioning and the ball finds middles all the time, right? Um, and they panic. So you got to train it to try to lose or reduce the panic, and then just force them to snap, use their hands, right? Push balls to zone one, and then really, I mean, this is a secret sauce strategy, but like everybody is getting good at sending balls to zone two. But because everybody's getting good at sending balls to zone two, everybody's getting really good at right front or the bro getting over there and taking that easy ball to zone two. So the next step beyond that is training your team um, to like what we would do is can you drop the ball on the path of the setter getting to their pocket? Because then at that point, the setter's got to take it if they're back row setter or even front row setter. They've got to take it, or now they got to deviate off their path, and that's going to create some problems. So I would say to answer your question, like create that in your drills. So if you do a one-way drill, a lot of people do like a 1-2-1 type drill, one or two of those touches needs to be a player initiated snap it to one, or you could do it off a bounce and make them, go. But you got to train them when it's an easy ball, the setter's coming to the net.
Yeah.
So don't send an easy ball to one because middle back's just going to get it. So find the path of the setter. And even at our level, we've seen success of setters just freak out and they just take that ball or it just drops. Even at our level, like an easy ball to two will drop. And then there's more strategies you can do. But I would just develop drills to add a find the setter, or if you just say, hey, all third balls that we can't crush go to the setter, and it doesn't happen, blow the whistle and fix it right there. And again, that could be 2 to 3 points a game right there.
Yep. And when the margins are thin and when the 2-5 team is winning 23 out of 48 rallies and the 7-0 team's winning 25 out of 48 rallies, that those make huge differences.
Well, and when the setter doesn't set the ball, everybody's numbers just drop
Yep.
drastic. The lower the level you are, the higher or the lower the efficiency gets for a non-setter, hitting off of a non-setter.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I feel like we could do this for hours and hours and hours, and you already have agreed to doing a part two with us, and so we'll get that scheduled, and we'll talk about some back row attacking tactics. We'll talk about tempo and timing, where you like your hitters to be
Mhm.
stepwise in their four-step approach when setters are setting. I also will talk about coaching your daughter, because you coached your daughter at Baylor, you coached your daughter at TCU, you watched your daughter play as an athlete at Tennessee when you were coaching with Baylor. And so there's some good conversations to be had about that. And we're looking forward to meeting with you again. Coaches out there, thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for your desire to learn, like Jason talked about. And if you have any questions, reach out to us and keep on learning, like Jason suggested. Jason, thank you again, and we're looking forward to speaking with you again. Any final words of advice to club coaches, high school coaches, head coaches, assistant coaches, just about everything that we've talked about over the past hour?
Yeah, I think one, thanks again for having me. This is awesome, and I love doing this stuff. As you can tell, I get pretty wordy, so I need to learn to be a little more efficient. But uh, I think for those who don't know already, like college coaches, we talk with each other and we want to grow the sport. Like we do a lot of stuff to help the sport grow. We like sharing knowledge. We don't. There are very few coaches in college that hold everything really tight. So, like, don't hesitate reaching out. When you come, like Lone Star qualifier is in Dallas this weekend, and I've got a lot of coaches coming to an open practice we have. I have a lot of coaches that come, just to practices at any time. And so wherever you are, like reach out to your local colleges and ask them if you can go to their practices because you can learn a lot that way. And some are going to say no, but that's for obvious reasons. But a lot are going to say yes, and we're not scary people at tournaments, so just come chat with us, and we are busy, right? We're trying to recruit when we're at club tournaments, but we also love sharing. And we were all in your spot at one time. Very few college coaches, especially even head coaches, did not start somewhere, high school or club or something. So yeah, just keep doing this. Like watching videos like this is what I did for years. And again, eventually you'll get to the point where you feel very confident on the volleyball piece, and then you can start working on the non-volleyball stuff. That's what I needed to do. So I'm still learning how to show the girls that I really care for them and trust them all the time as the decision maker, you know. So yeah, but this is awesome. Again, thanks for having me, and I look forward to the next one.
My introduction to gold medal squared was about 12 years ago. Chris McGowan was my golfing coach at BYU. My golf, but not my golfing coach, but he was the teacher of my golf PE class at
Mm,
BYU, and so we got to know each other. And I had a high school coaching background from California before I came up to BYU, and he said, "Hey, Dave, I know you do some videography stuff because we were Facebook friends. Do you want to come to Seattle with us and film our coaching clinic in Seattle?" And so I said, "I'm in," and I went. And at the time, I was planning on entering the news industry, and so I was majoring in broadcasting, and I wanted to be a news reporter, a sports reporter. Um, and I went out to Seattle and I met Jim McLaughlin and Rob Browning and Keegan Cook and these coaches that were just so willing to share knowledge, like you just talked about. And it was the exact opposite of everything I'd experienced in the news industry. And so I graduated and I called Rob Browning up and I said, "Hey, I've got a job offer to be a news reporter in Wisconsin." Um, and they offered me all the best cheese in the world, but I'd rather be a coach because I'd rather work with people like you. And so that got me back into coaching, where I worked with Rob Browning. But Jason, what you said is so true. We're so grateful that you're willing to share your knowledge with us, and that you're willing to have coaches in your gym and that we can learn from you. So once again, thank you, everyone out there. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for another episode with Jason, where we'll talk about back row attacking and tempo and some more X's and O's type ideas. And we're looking forward to that one. Have a good one, everybody.